Welcome everyone to the first pre-conference of this year. My name is Dr. Melissa Oden. I'm the project manager for Plan4Health, and we are super excited that you are here today. We actually created this summit for our 10 Texas Healthy Communities grantees, and so, where's Mark? I don't know where. There's Mark right over there. So, if you are in one of those cities, and you know who you are, if you are one of those 10 Healthy Texas Communities grantees, will you raise your hand, please, so we can recognize you? Yes, that's you at least. Yay. Okay, fantastic. Our grantees are doing some fantastic work in the state, and we are so super excited to be able to work with them. We are also excited today to have the rock star Mark Fenton here, the rock star walk audit guru Mark Fenton here. We'll get to you in just a moment. But what I do want to say real quickly is that restrooms are right out here to my left. So if you need those, you might need them because Mark is actually going to take us on a walk audit today. So you guys, I hope you guys read that in the description of this session. We are so thrilled to have him here to be able to do that. We will be closing these doors, so you can leave your things, or you can take them with you if you wish, but they should be just fine in this room. And Mark, we're going to be gone about 40 minutes. Is that correct? Give or take a little bit? Okay, so if you don't want to take your things, that is absolutely, completely fine. I do want to introduce our intern team over here. So we have, for this project, I've got my other grant over here too. I've got interns over here. So is my public health intern for this project, and Ryan, yes. And Ryan is our newly hired planning intern for this project. And we've got actually 2 other interns that work full-time and couldn't be here today, but we certainly want to acknowledge Portia and Kaylin as well. They are a great part of our team, and we do miss them today. So without further ado, let me just kind of introduce you to Mark Fenton. And Mark, I was not given your bio. I know we have one somewhere, but I think probably you would prefer to tell them a little bit about yourself anyway. But today is the first day Mark and I actually met face-to-face. Our team spent the last year, 6 months, with him online in the Walkability Virtual Academy. And let me tell you guys, that changed my life. I was really unsure about committing 6 months of my life to this because I already had so much going on, and the moment we got into it, I knew that I was in the right place at the right time and hearing the right people. And Mark was one of the faculty in that particular institute, and it was just absolutely amazing. I learned so many things. So we decided to reach out when we knew we were going to do this particular session and ask him if he would be our keynote, because we know that a lot of communities are struggling with the same things that the communities that we're working with are struggling with. And so we knew Mark would be the right person to help us kind of literally walk through some of these issues and challenges and figure out how to solve them for our communities. So, Mark, I'm going to go ahead and give you the microphone. And so please, let's welcome Mark Fenton.
Thank you, Mo. Thanks. Hi again. Mark Fenton. Are you guys comfortable with me not having my mask on? It's a lot easier to present that way, but I don't want to make anybody horribly uncomfortable. So thanks for that. I'm from the Boston area, so I'll probably talk too fast. You're allowed to tell me to slow down. I'm an engineer by training. Don't hold that against me. My card says I'm a public health planning and transportation consultant because I spend a lot of time at that nexus of land use decisions, transportation planning and engineering, and public health. And in fact, the Centers for Disease Control is where I spend a good third of my consulting time. The CDC is the entity that actually ran the Walkability Action Institute that Melissa was alluding to. That was an action, it was a team program put out to MPOs, metropolitan planning organizations around the country. You had to apply competitively, and you had to bring an interdisciplinary team. And in fact, you were required to have a planner, transportation person, preferably an engineer, an elected official, and somebody from public health at least on your team of 4. Plus, you could have others. Many teams also had somebody from Parks and Recreation, maybe from a community organization, from the schools. But the idea was to build an interdisciplinary working group to think about, we called it a Walkability Action Institute, but frankly, we should call it an Active Transportation Institute, because we were thinking about the active transportation modes. And the perspective on that is that's what the CDC cares about. The Centers for Disease Control knows that chronic diseases associated with sedentary lifestyles are among the leading killers. It's where the Plan4Health premise comes from. It's why there's money out there for planning organizations to be partnering with health organizations. Just out of curiosity, anybody in the room actually doing any of that overtly from the world of planning, working with health, or from the world of health, working with planning explicitly? This is not a rhetorical question. I'm saying raise your hand if you're doing this. No, not so much. Oh, yes, okay. But that's surprisingly less than I might have expected because there is conscious work going on around that. How many of you are familiar with this notion that, in fact, we are being told community design, again, not a rhetorical question. Raise your hand if you know the notion that urban design and planning has something to do with public health outcomes from a standpoint. And do we understand that that's associated with chronic disease prevention specifically? So it's not just environmental things like contaminants and emissions, but we now understand design can influence how physically active people are, and therefore the health outcomes associated with sedentary lifestyle. You'll hear more of this from me tomorrow morning. If you're at the plenary session, I'm opening up tomorrow morning and going to lay this argument out and give you some of the evidence and some of the promising practices. There's some really compelling stuff going on around the country. One of those things is that we see health partners and planners. Oh, and by the way, just as an aside, as well as professionally doing this, I was just visiting with Josh, who volunteers with the Fort Worth Planning Commission as one of the alternates. I've served many years on an elected planning board in my community, so I know what it's like to sit on that side of the table, too. We have elected boards. I'm from, again, New England, where it's not uncommon that planning boards are elected, not appointed by city council or the select board. And that's the case. So I served many years in an elected position and was chair for a while. So I know exactly how hard this stuff is. So when I tell you, when I make these admonitions, know that I understand exactly how hard it is to do. So having said that, one of the things we're seeing public health folks do when they connect with planning entities, either professional staff, planning commissions, private firms, is think about community engagement and doing it more inclusively. In other words, not just having a meeting when we say, okay, public input is required on this plan that we're about to propose, or on this corridor redesign, or on the update to our comp plan, right? Our long-range transportation plan. We're supposed to have public input, so we're going to have a series of meetings. They'll be in the public library, and the people will come, and particularly in small communities, but even in larger ones, I find again and again, the planners tell me they know who the usual suspects are, they know who's going to show up, what advocacy organizations will be well organized and have people lined up for the mic, what lobbyists will have their positions staked out. And it's not really inclusive community input, if you ask me. And I think a lot of us would agree with that. The idea of a walk audit is to actually get out in the community and walk through the space. We also do bike and transit audits and some combination of those. But to move through the space, preferably not just in an automobile, certainly not in a single occupancy automobile, and experience it and think about how it works for all users, not just drivers. How many of you are familiar with this notion of walk audits as a community engagement or planning technique? Again, not a rhetorical question. And this is not raising your hand. This is, Mark, I'm a lazy bum. At least get your elbow as high as your ear. All it's doing is giving me a sense of the landscape. All right, good. So, good number of you. How many have used walk audits or participated in them in your work? Again, not a rhetorical question. So about the same. All right, great. My proposal is that we do something of a miniaturized walk audit here. Walk audits can be done, by the way, when I've been a sub on a community that's doing it citywide, like Louisville, Kentucky, when they were doing their updating a citywide pedestrian plan, we did a bunch of them at different locations, and we kind of brought the findings together. In some communities that's about to do a corridor or something, we might do one in an afternoon. So it can be a multi-week process, or it can be a 3-hour process. We're going to do one in less than 2. And we're going just to show you some of my learnings from what I think makes an effective walk audit. So did everybody come in here sort of with that expectation? Did you read and think that I was going to learn about what this guy's take on how we can use walk audits is? Did anybody have a different expectation than that? Not a rhetorical question. Yeah. Well, that's what you're in for. So here's what I'm going to do. There will be 3 phases, basically, 4. The 3 phases of the walk audit itself would be some preparatory discussion just to set us up, because we're going to level set the group. The group could have parents who are just concerned about whether their kids can safely walk to school that have no planning, engineering, transportation background at all. And you could have the head of the Department of Public Works and the planning director, right? People with lots of background and technical knowledge. And by the way, the person from Bike Texas who's a total bike geek, and the local trails advocate who's a nut about that stuff, right? I mean, you could have a real range of sort of investment and knowledge. Fair? You've dealt with that in your own work. So I recommend that step one is a little bit of level setting. Step two is to go do the walk in a facilitated way. I'll show you how I like to do it. And step three is to come back and actually capture thoughts, recommendations, proposals for next steps. That third step depends very much on the purpose of your walk audit, right? Are we updating a comp plan? Are we doing a corridor study? Are we just doing some community engagement or learning? So that will dictate what you try to do. But we're going to replicate those three steps. Everybody good? So we're going to do a little setup thing. We're going to go for a walk for about 40 minutes and then come back and do a lightning quick little planning exercise, show you how I debrief groups after we walk. Cool? Here's how, this is the church basement version of one, by the way. So this is one we're not, and then phase four will be, I'm going to show you some slides afterwards summarizing some of my takeaways on successful walk audits. That's not necessarily part of doing the workshop, though. You should be able to do a walk audit, meeting people in the gazebo in their town square, and do a stand-up prep, go do the walk, and then have somewhere you can sit down around tables to do some debrief, ideally with aerial photos or maps of the area. But if you don't have that, flip charts and markers, anything to capture their input. Do not let the lack of technology and lots of stuff keep you from doing this kind of community engagement. I think we do way too little of it, and we should use whatever means is available to us. So if there's a Boys and Girls Club, a church, a Y, another community organization willing to host a walk audit, and you got to go with a flip chart on the wall, then do it. That's really strong advice. I feel really strongly about this. May I reach through here and grab some of these? So here's how I might start the conversation. Our goal, one of our goals, is to make it easier for people to walk and bike, and if our community's large enough that we have it, take transit, right? Or maybe it's just large, that the kids will use the school bus and can safely walk to a school. That's a form of transit, right? Mass transit, public transit. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, what are things that you think characterize an environment where people are more likely to walk or bike? Would you open these for me? Walk or bike more often. What characterizes, just throw a thing out. Now imagine, this is just a room full of regular people, maybe planners, maybe not. Go ahead, what do you got? Tree shade, I'm going to say trees. Wait a minute, I'm going to catch up, good. No, this is good. It's what we wanted. No, it's fine, Thank you though, thanks for the offer. Sidewalk, give me another. Bike lanes, keep going. Wait, you said interesting things, and what was the example you gave?
Like stores.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Like coffee shops or whatever.
Somebody in the far side of the room said something that I didn't get. And what do you mean by density, talking like a planner, not a regular civilian person? But that's cool, because there could be a planner in the room, and they might say exactly that. So your job is to say, what do you mean by density? Lots of shops. So he's not just saying one or two, lots of. No, that's important. That's what density means. That's a really good answer. Good. Shade. Not just trees. You want to say trees. And in lovely Texas, where it can get hot any time of the year, shade. Excellent. Crosswalks. Nice. I want my other color. Go ahead. Wait, there was somebody, so I got crosswalks. You started to say something.
Yeah, I was going to ask the bike lanes.
Go ahead.
Not just bike lanes, but like protected. I don't know how that.
That's okay, yeah. So some amount of protection, separation from traffic. Maybe not just a 6-inch stripe between me and cars going 45 miles an hour. Fair, or 65, right, yeah. And what kind of signage? What are you thinking? So there's sort of safety kinds of signs like pedestrian crossing. Is there another kind of sign? Directional, wayfinding, something like that. Yeah, all right, cool. Speed adjustments, what does that mean? Could I introduce the group to a term we'll call traffic calming, which is maybe familiar, but maybe not, but your job as a facilitator is to level set the group, and you might say, so there's an entire discipline. Traffic engineers and planners know about a bunch of tools that can be used on a roadway that might slow cars down, but still maintain flows pretty effectively. And in fact, often some of those tools will also make it safer for motor vehicles. So we're gonna, if you guys are comfortable with it, we'll put that term out there. Excellent. And could we even think about this one? You said wheelchair access, but there is a range of mobility challenges, right? A world that includes everything from walking with my walker or somebody using crutches after a knee surgery to visual impairment, right? Let us imagine a range of accessibility tools that make it work for everybody. Is that capture your thought? Is that fair? Okay, I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but it's a great addition. Oh, nice. Wow. And what gets people activity going? What are things that maybe make people activity happen? So it's related to places to go to. Is that the only thing, though? Yeah. Say it again. Events. It could be events. Yeah, that's right. Wow, that's cool. It could be across the street, this amazing water park that, man, I would go hang out there just to watch people do the things they do in that water park over there. It's such a cool space, right? Kids running up and down. Say that again. So I can't you don't want just a sidewalk here and a nice trail over there. You want them to be connected. Maybe could I even put a word up here into something of a comprehensive network? Would that be a fair word to capture some of what you're getting at? So they have to get you to the stuff, don't they? All right, now, yep, go ahead. Excellent. Green spaces and parks. And somebody else had a hand over here. Yes?
So kind of in addition to sidewalks, a lot of times it's the width. Sometimes if it's too narrow,
Yep.
people are making these crosswalks.
Yeah. I'm not doing a very good job there. Huh? That got a big from a lot of people who said, "Oh, why didn't I say that? Oh, now she's the teacher's pet." Okay, sir. I have had some amazing meals, notably desserts in church basements that are enviable. I am right with you on that. You're absolutely, and really good coffee if it's an evening event. Yeah, totally true. Or a morning one for that matter. Great. Okay, I'm going to stop here. You can imagine how much longer you could go. You guys know where I'm going with this, right? I mean, you're all planners. You could do your version of this. One of the reasons I did, anybody got a guess why I did that grid? Why was I trying to segregate things? What was I getting at? So this is going to be a gross oversimplification. We could get into a massive argument. A room full of planners, we could spend an hour and a half discussing why mine is not a good summation of the research. But I'm going to suggest there tend to be 4 characteristics, if you read the research literature in this field, associated with high levels of the active transportation modes. That characterize settings where we tend to see higher mode shares for walk, bike, and transit as opposed to just motor vehicle traffic. They tend to be the quality and connectivity of the network for active transportation. So quality and connection, you even use the word, of the network for of AT facilities. So it's everything from sidewalks to bike lanes, multi-use trails and pathways, transit stops, frequency, right, cost, minimum cost barriers and so on. It's clearly about the mix and density of land uses. So I didn't mean to get on you about density, because I would, of course, say that. Although we do know that for some people, that's a danger word, right? Density, ooh, bad. Urban, you mean you want to turn my suburban neighborhood into a ghetto. I literally have heard those words in a public meeting. I don't know if anybody else has run into that unkind a response, but it's absolutely. So sometimes we talk about compact and mixed development, but you guys know the deal there. The last two, we could argue about whether they're two different ones or one, but one is really about sort of the details of design. Some people call this placemaking, but it's the details of design, and it's not just aesthetics, by the way. It's about functional and inviting placemaking, and I would argue directly related to that. And by the way, we didn't talk about that, but I would submit that there's subtle things, like whether a building is behind a giant parking lot or set up at the street, right? Whether we have build to or setback lines, but street trees, awnings, benches, all that kind of stuff, bicycle parking. And then over here, we were beginning to get at it, and you really drove it home with, I would argue, safe access for absolutely everybody, of all ages, incomes, abilities, races, disabilities, every background. Yeah, exactly, universal design. Okay, cool. I would submit that that's not an unfair way to think about how the research falls out. And if you were to pull a paper out of an APA journal or a public health journal or a transportation engineering journal and say, well, they did a study and they found more walking here or a higher rate of, higher mode split with bicycle use here, I would suggest most of your findings we would put into one of those four big piles. I think there's a benefit, by the way, to simplifying it this way, which is that non-technicians can understand it. Not everybody has to have a planning background to have thoughtful input. Indeed, that's the whole idea of what we're about to go do. So there's a reason I create this simple frame, whether I show slides and local pictures that they will recognize that reflect these things, or whether we just make this list and get people thinking about it, and maybe I even ask people for examples. Where's there a place where you feel like there's good, safe access for all, or the network is really well connected for bicycling, right? And maybe somebody will actually say, oh, I love it on such and such street. Questions on this part of the process? This could be elaborate or not. This could be slides or not, but there's an idea here of setting sort of a common language. And I'm going to repeat the four things a gazillion times. Here's why. Because when we go on a walk audit, it's really easy for everybody to stay in this box and talk all the time about the sidewalk and the quality of the sidewalk and whether there are tripping hazards and whether it's wide enough and whether it's shade or not. And I want them to go beyond that. And I certainly want them thinking about land use, because we all know that if you're not, if you don't have appropriate mix of land uses, people aren't going to walk or bike or take train. Okay, so is that fair? I'm going to hit this a lot with the group. I tend to talk about three scales. The macro scale of land use, where stuff is, how dense and mixed it is. The connecting network of facilities between them, that's the meso scale, if you will. And the micro scale, the details of design that are rewarding and functional for somebody outside their car. Questions? Thoughts? Major refutations and arguments? You okay with it? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go for a walk, and we're going to walk a few intervals. We're not going to go far because we just don't have that much time. So we're going to just go down. We're going to go down the stairs, out the door. I've got a little route. It's just essentially around the block, basically. And we're going to stop at intervals. And when we stop, I'm going to ask us to convene close enough that we can talk with one another. I've tried to find places where we aren't going to be shouting over traffic, but I'm going to ask you to score the segment we just walked on a 0 to 10 scale. 1 0 to 10 scale, not 4, but you're using all four of these as your vectors, if you will. So if you thought it was great in all four of these areas, you'd give it a 10. If you thought 2 of them are good, but 2 are pretty crummy, it might be in the 5, 6 range. And if you thought it stunk in all 4, you'd give it a 0 or 1 or a 2. Does everybody understand the idea of what we're going to do? It's a very qualitative process, but it makes every opinion valid. Public works director, parent worried about walking their kid to school, my mom at 84 worried about whether she can get to the coffee shop or not. Everybody gets to say a number. And your job as facilitator is to make sure it's all heard. Got it? Okay, so we're going to go now. I'm going to grab my camera because I'm taking pictures of you. I'm going to leave this. I'm going to head out that door and you're going to follow me. I walk fast. Sorry, I'm a former competitive race walker. That's the price of admission. You got to keep up with me. Everybody, you should be back at a table. Somebody should be grabbing the form in the middle. Would you hold yours up right now? So, and the last page of that is a grid. It reminds you about the 3 Ps. So we've done our walk. We're now back. You're going to download really quickly at least one programmatic idea, one infrastructure project, one policy recommendation that you think would enhance the walkability of the area where we just were. And really what we really are thinking about is active transportation. So if you could make it better for walking, bicycling, and or transit use, any of those recommendations valid for the conversation. Are there questions about what you're doing now? I'm only going to give you like a few minutes. So 3 ideas at least, preferably more. Go. If you find you've had success with the left column of the grid, some of those shorter term, lower cost ideas, you could put some big ideas in the right-hand column if you're on the grid, which are some of the longer term, higher cost things, if you're having success. Okay, if you haven't done so yet, move out of brainstorming mode, shift to what do we want to share mode. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Take a look at the ideas you've already put down and think about if any of them kind of work together toward a goal. Often it's not uncommon when you get in a conversation like this that your programmatic idea supports the infrastructure change you're going to recommend, or there's a policy that sort of would get well illustrated by one of you. You know, we're going to do a complete streets policy and we're going to do this project, which would be a good illustration of that. So look for that and think about what you would share with the group. If you can find a couple of things that sort of naturally build toward an outcome. You guys with me on this? Now, maybe it didn't go that way. Maybe your table's not as smart as the other table. No, I'm kidding. No. I'm sure you all had brilliant ideas that wove. So just think about a couple of things that might build on one another that you could share. Take a minute right now, then we're going to just do a quick share out. Everybody understand what we're doing? Talk about what your ideas that you already have down, and pick a speaker, by the way. Because when I come to your table, I don't want to do the fingers at each other thing. Somebody decide who's going to talk. That's the most important thing you're doing right now, in fact, deciding the who's going to talk thing. So again, you're sharing one great idea or a couple if they go together naturally, just to be clear. All right, let's bring it in. All right, here's what we're going to do. Just make our way around the room. I'm going to hand you the mic. Okay. Everybody. Let's bring it in. So there are two signs that a work session is going well. Needless to say, if you can't get people to shut up normally, but more, we call it the butts out of the seats, right? So if you've got aerial photos and maps on the table and people are leaning over and drawing on them and everybody's up, that's a good sign, right? You guys know this if you're a planner and you do this kind of stuff. But I like the energy, and I apologize for cutting you short. I know you could spend much more time on this, but you understand we're just doing this as an exercise. We only had a 2-block laboratory. So having said that, there is a method to my madness. I do want to do the report out because I want us to listen for themes and things, okay? Is everybody cool with that? I know that you might feel like, look, none of us, this isn't our project. Why do we have to go through this part of the exercise? Go with me on it, all right, if you don't mind. Is it you? Okay, good. What do you got?
So for programs on the longer term, we were discussing the water gardens and the potential for Parks and Rec to really bring creative arts opportunities to that center, bring youthful activities for families to gather, and also include like pocket parks, and the pocket parks that we saw, use those zones as creative zones for Parks and Rec, farmers market, and in terms of policies, we didn't notice no food trucks, so I don't know if there's a policy against food trucks, but food trucks would be cool to have at the water gardens, as we see at Cladwarren Park in Dallas.
Is that the park that's over the highway? Yeah, right, got it.
Yeah. So Yeah, that's what we discussed on terms of
Well,
programs. and policies.
that's a great example. So here they're talking about activating the parks and putting on events and so on, and tying to that a policy, right? So there's this programmatic idea, and the policy that may have to enable that could also be to, for example, food trucks, carts, other things like that, vendors, maybe, like you say, mobile farmers market. There are any number of things one could do that might have policy requirements, right? We may have to do ordinance to allow for food, distribution in these locations, or temporary parking in places where the trucks can't park. Brilliant. That's a great example. Also, what kind of a price tag do you have to put on that? Very low, potentially, right? You could have a bunch of natural partners, boys and girls clubs who could say, we want to do art programs with the kids in the parks. We've even got people that would want to do it. Brilliant. It's a great example. Equally good will be this, of course.
I thought you went that way. Good afternoon. So our overall goal or mission or vision is to bring more pedestrian activity and engagement to the space that we just walked. Some of the programs we thought of would be potentially have maybe a pop-up shops or in front of those vacant storefronts, because there were a number of them that were vacant. Projects, again, to create a more of a pedestrian area, maybe paint more of the sidewalks. The crosswalks were really bland, I guess is what one word that was described. Providing more seatings. Mural was another thing to create some excitement to the area. As far as policies, we talked about housing, more incentives to bring housing to the area, bring more people. Again, the whole point is to bring pedestrian activity. We thought of closing a street maybe on a specific week or month or whatever it is, to create that that interest so that people would come and visit the area. So sort of that's what we came up with.
And I can see those pieces. That might sound disparate. Here they are doing housing policy at one end of the spectrum, and they're talking about painting murals at the other. But does everybody get that sort of the continuity of the approach there was reactivate the streets, but you got to have the people there if you're going to do that, which is where residential policy could play an important role. Good. Excellent examples. Are you the person? Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, so for programming, we talked about activation of space, particularly the green space that we passed, and having residents take ownership of that space. Maybe through tactical urbanism, introducing native plants, community gardens, maybe introducing public art through murals. And then project-wise, we talked about road diet, adding on-street parking, street trees, filling holes, adding better lighting, better wayfinding that came up a lot. And then policy-wise, we talked about a policy towards subdivision of space, towards more single users, a minimal rentable space requirement, so that those spaces can be better filled than they are now.
So you're thinking about the fact that there are these spaces that aren't activated yet. Got to make it small enough that we can reoccupy. So there's a real strong, in both cases here, well, all three so far, kind of a post-COVID, how do we re-energize too, then I'm hearing as a theme, right? Does that sound right? Good. What do you got? Scott.
So we talked about a lot of the things that other folks. So to focus on public art, the policy part of that could be incorporating in a certain percentage of your capital improvement projects towards funding public art, and your public art could also be part of one of our suggestions was crosswalks. So how do you incorporate design or wayfinding designs into your public art? So that you can capture those dollars. So you have the policy aspect as well as the implementation.
Really important distinction there to say, look, we're going to actually make a policy. This won't just be a fly-by-night and then it'll disappear after we fund it for one season or something like that. Build it into the budget and have it be. And then the notion of public art as functional space, that reminds me of sort of Des Moines, Iowa, that had all of their bike racks were really unique and done by local artisans that worked in metals and so on. So there are lots of ways you can go in that direction, but those are good examples. Or what community was in, it might have been Omaha, where they were doing all the signal boxes were being painted by local artists. That's not uncommon, right? But you guys get the idea, and you've seen many of those ideas. Who's our note? There you go.
Okay, sure thing. All right, yeah, same theme here is activating the streetscape, as we've heard from other groups. So pop-up events, that green space down on Lancaster and Houston Street could be like food trucks every now and then. We could close down an adjacent street every month to do something like that. Bus and bike lane education, so trying to make people downtown more aware of that thing's existence. Yeah. Short-term projects, some maintenance. There were empty tree wells, so putting new trees in there to help with the shade. streetscape art, so getting some paint, tackling some of these institutional walls in the building we're in, the building next door. Then wayfinding signage, which they had a really great idea on the art and the wayfinding, so that's a good idea. And then streamlining the permitting and the policies. So is it like legal to do that? Is there like a mechanism? So we think that needs to happen. And then really economic development, recruiting businesses for some of these vacant spaces.
Good, excellent. Recurring themes here, right? That's a good sign, by the way, right? When we hear multiple themes and we start to think, ooh, maybe there's some consensus, we can get a group to move forward on it, or it becomes part of the planning document or whatever it is we happen to be working on, right?
Okay, so we were kind of going, like we were thinking a downtown redevelopment pedestrian overlay district would be cool because then you could.
So right to policy. We're going to create an overlay district down here. Nice.
You could incorporate all the changes that you want to make with all 3 Ps, like updating signage and the crosswalk updates and painting and adding in bike lane protection and making, people do these things whenever they want to come in and do business in your
So
city.
you create, not unlike you guys talked about, an expedited permitting process that makes it easy to do that rather than having to jump through hoops to try any of these kinds of things. Excellent observation. Great. Great. Very good. I like it. All right. It's taking shape. Anybody at this table? Okay, there you go.
Yes, sir. We focused on more, I guess, multi-use, like zone changes, having more uses in a zone. That way you can have residential, you can have business, you can have restaurants all in one area, more than just broken up. And it would also break the monotony of some of these glass and brick walls that you walk by. And he also mentioned a business improvement district, adding more city art and that kind of thing in maybe those zones. Like you say, hey, if you want to build here, you have to throw in a mural or something like that. So it's more.
Business improvement district doesn't always have to just be pure dollars, right?
Right.
In-kind contribution, it can be participation in other ways, if I heard what you just said. You want the dollars. You want the money.
Yeah, they just want the money. But that's about it, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I'm curious about what sort of the disposition of some of these buildings are, and is there space where if you could rezone to get residential in them, you'd get more? So you've got the T&P, the former train station, but is there an opportunity for more of this core residential here? Because that's certainly popular now, right? We know this is happening in cities around the country. So the question is this a district where it could happen here?
Thanks. So we focus on the projects, and so we were talking about a protected bike lane, especially on Throckmorton Street.
But is there enough roadway width, he says sarcastically.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and we also talked about updating the paint to make it clear for not only bus lanes and the bike riders. Right. And so with that, we would also have to update the signage, and so it would make it more inviting for a lot of bikers, maybe even near the Trinity River, kind of connecting downtown to the Trinity River. So there's,
The big connected word up there on our networks, right?
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yeah.
Connect.
And then so for the longer term project, it would be working with the ADA to update leveling sidewalks around that area as well. And so it's kind of like connecting people to everyday destinations.
Yeah, great. Which is, of course, the CDC, that's exactly, the Centers for Disease Control calls this portion of its physical activity strategy physically active routes to everyday destinations. They use that language. You could argue that that's the dumbed down version of this, and I don't have any problem with that at all because I can say it to a total non-technician, a city councilor, a planning commissioner who's never had formal training, and I can get them there, right? I can help them understand that, and that's fine. So I love that you guys are making that connect. Did you guys do this work over here, or were you over here goofing around? It's okay, goofing around. Yeah, overseeing. Yeah, a lot of overseeing. All right, so, my friends, did everybody hear the themes that naturally evolved here? And I know you didn't show all of your stuff and everything, but it's clear that if this were a real working session and you had enough time and we had materials and so on, there was a direction and there were a bunch of ideas and they were arranged from some of the stuff that you could do very quickly, immediately. You could probably partner up with philanthropic groups. I mean, we've seen Rotary clubs do things like say, we'll take on replanting trees in the dead tree wells, right, in the empty tree wells, or a scout troop or something like that, or an Arbor Day organization, all the way to we're rewriting city zoning or creating an overlay district to facilitate lots of these ideas that we don't want to just be episodic, but to become systematic. Systematic changes, not just episodic changes. All right, so thank you, by the way. You clearly took seriously the little challenge I gave you to do the exercise. You didn't just kind of half-ass it. Thank you, I appreciate that. No, because I think as a result, you saw one other big takeaway that I often will say to communities at this critical moment. Would it be fair to say that there were a number of ideas that fall under the $10,000 cost realm? Does everybody, am I seeing nodding heads? Would it be fair to say there were even some ideas that fell under the $5,000 and possibly the $1,000 cost area? They're more about facilitating permitting and just finding partners who would want to do it. The food trucks that want to reload, that would want to be able to access it, but just don't have the capacity right now because it's not allowed or there's no place for them. You with me on this? It's really important that we acknowledge that. There's a reason I have that left column when I do this exercise. It's really important, because everybody can talk about the road diet that might be, when we do a repaving project, and that's 4 years away because Houston's not due to be repaved for another, it's not going to cycle up till date X. Got it. But until then, don't tell me there's nothing we can do or that we don't have resources. Also importantly, not everybody's working in Fort Worth and Dallas and Houston and Austin and big cities. For those of you that are working in small towns and communities, they are resource limited. We have to have ideas that don't cost a gazillion dollars, my friends from Mathis, right? And there are lots of those, and you heard many of them. Even though we were in a super urban environment, there were any number of tools here that would be utterly relevant in Mathis. Wayfinding, paint, improved crosswalk art painted by local students, literally. There you go. And I'll even show some pictures of some of this kind of stuff tomorrow morning, just as examples in my plenary. So if you happen to get up early, but I know you're all going out partying tonight, and you're not even coming in for the morning plenary, that's fine. So you're going to have to suffer through a couple more minutes. I just want to give you a few thoughts on sort of my observations around walk audits and sort of my parting shots here, best practices. By the way, first, take a breath. Questions up to this moment. Go.
Would it be possible to collect all these great ideas just in case they might want to be used by the next?
I was going to take these documents, if you will allow me. Don't leave without bringing them up to Dr. Oden or I, because we do want to actually collect them. Yeah, I did want to do that. Thank you, Andrew. In fact, I am friends with Kelly Porter, who's the new assistant. What's his position? He's one of the deputy directors in TPW, Transportation and Public Works here. And he's thinking about lots of this stuff. He just came up from Austin. No, I mean that. He's going to hear all of this stuff. So you didn't waste your energy. I'm going to be talking to him. Okay, I also, by the way, quick side note, I consult a little with Blue Zones. Have you guys heard of Blue Zones? They're a national health organization. Fort Worth has done the Blue Zones project, and indeed we're doing some ongoing work with them. So yes, Andrew, none of this has been wasted, and it will be shared because there's a lot of brain power. So, okay, this is the cool thing I want to show you here. Walk audit in Los Cerritos, California, Los Cerritos Elementary, in San Mateo, California. No, South San Francisco. We're on the walk audit. We get to this nice sidewalk that connects where the high school campus is through affordable housing to where the elementary school campus is, and there's this post in the middle of it that literally would not allow a kid to walk a bicycle through. You'd have to be really clever and kind of lift it up and over or push a stroller through. So as we were on the walk audit, fortunately one of the participating parents had a stroller with us, which totally drove home the inaccessibility of the location. And it made everybody think, wow, you wouldn't be able to get through here with a wheelchair or with a bicycle. Also with us on the walk was a city councilor who said, well, I can't believe that. I had no idea this was here. And literally they sent me this photo, 4 weeks later, Public Works. Now, I would love a beautiful accessible ramp here, and they're supposed to still have done that. But within weeks, the post was gone. Which, by the way, was literally a barrier to older siblings being able to walk to pick up their younger siblings. This is a low and moderate income neighborhood where in many cases siblings are doing exactly that, walking younger siblings to and from school. The kids from the high school are walking over to the elementary school to pick up their sibs, right? And they can't do that with their bike if that post is there. Immediate outcome from a walk audit. Okay, just an example. So, these are the kinds of things, by the way, I'll make these slides available to everybody. We'll make sure anybody who wants them can have them, I guess, through the website or however the easiest way to do that. But these are some of the things we talked about, thinking about what your goals are, what partners, who might actually take you on the walk. Could some kids from that local school be the ones who lead me on the walk? Whether we're just trying to do a qualitative experience, much like today, or quantitative. You could have checklists and be doing things like marking specific curb ramps that need repairs immediately, right? It can be much more objective with who's the target audience? Are we really trying to tell planning and zoning? Are we trying to work with the Public Works Department? I urge you to always pre-scout the route so you have an idea of what you're getting into and whether it's accessible to all of the participants and things like that. And look for those teachable moments, but most important, do what we just did. And this is really, I think, the foundational thing. If you don't take anything else away, the idea of a walk audit is not the experts telling everybody else on the walk the answers. I hope I didn't come across that way. I hope it felt to you like my job was to facilitate a shared experience of discovery and collective problem solving. And if I didn't do that well, then when you go do it, do better than I did. Because that's what you should be doing. Shared discovery, collective problem solving. Otherwise, nobody owns it. Nobody owns the solution. So I just want to be clear. By the way, the other nice thing is it is physical activity. So in as much as we're trying to connect to health, this gentleman was with us on a training we were doing for, these were all going to be walk audit facilitators, and he has a type 2 diabetes. And he said, I forgot my insulin today, and he's not from, we were in Bozeman, Montana. He said, I thought I was going to have to go home and not be able to go on the walk. But because we were being physically active, I kept my insulin levels, sugar levels at a healthier level. Because we were so active today, I got through the day without having to he was checking to make sure he was safe. The point being, the physical activity, he had this instantaneous example of the value of physical activity, which we also know has an immediate effect on blood pressure, both blood sugar and blood pressure, positive response to routine physical activity. And he said, and he told everybody, the reason I'm telling you this story is because he told this story to the room. I said, can I share that example? Because it's the classic sort of why is walking good for me? Why is being physically active good for me? He was the embodiment of that. Okay, so I already talked about the 4 elements: land use, network, details of site design, safety and access for all. Lots of photos. You can have photos from the community. Again, a reminder that it happens on these 3 scales: the macro scale of site design, land use decisions, the meso scale of the connected network, and the micro scale of the details of site design, accessibility and functionality for all. The logistics, I would normally target something in the 1 to 1.5 mile range. My experience is you can be out for about an hour and cover that, obviously adjusting for the conditions, the group. When we've done walk audits in Anchorage, Alaska in winter, we're moving a little slower. And we're spending a lot more time talking about snow clearing policy and things like that. Totally relevant, by the way. I have never, ever accepted somebody's argument that, that'd be a bad time or the weather won't be good. I'll say, so do we not expect kids to be able to walk to school when it's raining in your community? I want to see the water that pools at the bottom of the curb ramps or that freezes there when it gets cold in cold weather environments. So I say, it's going to be dark out, Mark. Good, we'll know how bad the lighting is. It's a great opportunity. We talked theoretically about lighting on this walk. We would experience it in a few hours, wouldn't we? So the agenda, remember the 3 elements I talked about: intros, the actual walk audit itself, and then the solution process, whatever that is. These are all the kinds of invitees. I don't have to burden you with sort of reading the list. I think they are all intuitive to all of you. I would point out, I think we fall short often on number 10, that is, or 9 and 10, sort of the private sector, this middle section here. Employers, local businesses, developers, realtors, lenders. Many of you know lenders are often the stumbling blocks. So when we look at suburban development models, right, often we want to set parking maximums rather than minimums, but the guy who's developing the Walmart says, no, I want 7 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of retail. Whether your ordinance requires it or not, I expect that much out there. And it's the lender driving the bus on that, right? You guys know all of this. They need to be on the walk. They need to know that my mom can't make it from the bus stop that drops her off out at the road across the no man's land of that giant parking lot to the door, that they're losing that customer. And making them walk it sometimes helps them get there. And don't ask any of these people you're inviting what they're going to do for you. Ask how you guys can work collectively on shared goals. And I'll talk a little about that, particularly from the economic development angle tomorrow, because I think there's very good evidence that we can say to many of these partners, you don't have to care about whether people get their daily physical activity. I may, because I'm in the Plan4Health program, I may care about exercise and physical activity. But if you care about economic development, if you care about reducing stormwater runoff, we got something for you in here. And at the American Public Health Association meetings in Philadelphia a year and a half ago, right before the pandemic, we did a walk audit from their downtown convention center. This was the loop right through their sort of municipal services building, big municipal plaza. The only reason I'm telling you that, so you can see 3 stop points, 1, 2, 3. These are what those locations were. But famously in the municipal plaza, that's Frank Rizzo. Anybody know that name? Is that familiar in this part of the world? Former Philadelphia mayor. Notorious racist, absolutely horrible, horrible man, had been former police commissioner there, and indeed that statue has since been taken down. So when I went to scout the route, interestingly enough, I had a stopping there, and I, as a non-Philadelphian, and perhaps as a white male, was unaware of that detail, right? That's not a history that I knew well in Philadelphia. And I did the scouting, so I had a standing under this statue. It had not been taken down at that point as our stop point on the walk. And thankfully, some of my friends and colleagues, I work with a diverse group of participants, and they said, do you know who this guy is? And we had a great talk about that. And we said, you know, Mark, were we doing an actual community workshop here and had a bunch of Philadelphians, this was a bunch of people like you that had attended a conference, that might literally have been offensive to be standing right there by this guy. So make sure you have good local insight as you scout a route and learn. We had a really cool conversation about it, and it was really powerful, and it got everybody thinking about, and this was, by the way, before, it was the beginning of the pandemic, right? It's before really Black Lives Matter and the whole movement had started that summer. It was a precursor to everything that was coming. It was so, sort of, if you will, foretelling. It was a really good experience for me, a great learning experience. You will learn every walk audit you go on. I do still every single time. And again, shared discovery and shared solutions. By the way, the other interesting thing we learned that there was only one ramp on and off of there. So we literally walked in and then had to walk back out because we realized everything else was stairways. And we had a very mixed group, including people in wheelchairs and so on. There was no other way to exit that municipal plaza. In the pandemic, just 2 seconds on this, we did a lot of work with communities when literally nobody was traveling. We still kept doing virtual walk audits, and we used a technique called photo voice. Is that familiar to anybody here, the idea of photo voice? The idea of asking people to take photos and simply applying a caption, very short caption, so it's photo voice. Those are the 2 parts. And you give it a simple directive like, take a few pictures of things that encourage walking and bicycling, a few that discourage it, and a surprise or 2, something unexpected, like the bike that's locked to a dumpster behind the building because there are no bike racks, showing you that there is, in fact, a demand for bicycling facilities. They're just not being met. So those are the kinds of instructions. And I would say this, when you're working particularly with just non-technicians, again, residents, citizen scientists, if you will, and that's what we call them, citizen scientists, we give them a few tips on taking photos, like having people in the photos if you can get them that way. Not in an offensive way. We're not trying to capture photos, faces, but we get a sense of the width of this pathway if there are people there. If they're not there, I don't know if that's a 6 or an 8-foot path. That road, maybe it'd be a nice road to bike, maybe it isn't, but when I put some bicyclists there, I get a sense of the lane widths and so on. Why are we traffic calming this neighborhood? Well, nobody bikes there anyway. This puts the lie to that. Well, apparently somebody bikes in that neighborhood, right? So capturing people. The other tips I give are make sure they're representative. You know, does that what a subdivision in your community looks like, or is it more like this? Is this what retail looks like, or is this more typical? And maybe it's a mix, so capture those in your photos. And go to real destinations. Take your photos of real places. This may not sound like rocket science, but it's really good if you're going to do virtual walk audits with people, giving them just enough of this kind of instruction. You'll tend to capture far more interesting photos that'll be more tell more of a complete story. Oh, and changing your perspective. You know, this person went out behind the Costco and found this hole in the fence. In fact, this was mine. I took this photo. Now that I think about it, and I remember asking some local kids, "What's the deal?" And they said, "Well, it's a good shortcut back to the neighborhood." And I said, "Did you guys take the wood down?" They said, No. I said, "If we put the wood back up, what would happen?" They'd say, "It'd be gone in 2 days." But they did not take it down. And indeed, it begs the question, why don't we in fact put an archway there and make a nice path to that neighborhood so they don't have to walk out to the arterial to get to that Costco or whatever that mall was. A little height can change a picture too. Okay, so the point is, if you're going to use a virtual walk audit technique, simple tips to the users can be helpful. And my hope would be this is just one more arrow in the quiver as we think about building our post-COVID world, that it can be a more inclusive and equitable approach to doing the planning work that you all do already. I know you perhaps have used techniques like this. I think we have to be far more intentional about the community engagement that this kind of work entails, and we have to think about every opportunity to do it, and most importantly, to get the voices that are least likely, least typically heard in our planning meetings. That's who we should be going out and trying to find to go for a walk with. If I leave you with that thought only, it will have been worth it, because I think there are a lot of those voices out there that have much to add to the work we do and often are not part of it. So, you guys have been great. I really appreciate it. Any final questions, thoughts, additions, refutations, arguments? Ready for a beer, probably? Call it a day. Thank you guys for coming. I hope it was useful. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Mark, thank you so much. This has been phenomenal. Thank you, thank you. And I want to remind all of you that Mark will be speaking at the plenary at 8:30 in the morning. Could you have not made that a little later? I'm kidding. Says the night owl. But he will be speaking again at 8:30 in the morning, and I highly encourage all of you to come and listen. He will be imparting more words of wisdom. I do want to recognize 3 of our Plan4Health communities that are in the room today. We have the city of Mathis right here. So wave to everybody. Mathis is working with us. Yay. We have the city of Paris over here. Andrew Mack is the city planner for the city of Paris. We're working with them right now. And our pilot, our guinea pig, our first victim, participant, City of Tyler, Russell Hopkins is over here with the Health District. And we are going to be looking for 2 more communities to be working with this grant year, so we've got more great work to do. But Mark, thank you so much for setting the tone for us. We really do appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing you in the morning. So if anybody wants, Mark, I guess you'll send me the PowerPoint. We'll be sure that anybody that wants this can get it. I'll be sure that Mike McAnally has it at least.
They said, yeah, this is an APA computer, so I think they'll have it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but if for whatever reason you don't get it, just be sure you get in contact with me or Mike McAnally. We'll be sure that you get it. Anything else? I can't think of anything else. Interns, am I forgetting? Oh, I do want to recognize our interns. We have Ryan over here. He's our planning intern. We have She's our public health intern for any of you who did not get to see her, these 2 earlier. Thank you so much for helping us out with this. We really appreciate it. We do have 2 more who couldn't be here today, so we want to recognize them as well, Portia and Kaylin. So I believe it's dinner time. So I hope everyone will go out and have a great evening, and we'll see you in the morning for Mark's plenary at 8:30. Thanks, everyone.